Breaking news, more than 2 years after Adnan Syed walked out of a Baltimore City courthouse a free man, Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates is dropping the request to throw out Syed's murder conviction. That means that Syed is convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Haymon Lee.
Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, with the judge, vacated the sentence in 2022, citing new evidence. Now the city state's attorney claims Mosby's original motion included, quote, false and misleading statements.
Ivan Bates' decision really calls into question the integrity of the investigation that the Mosby administration conducted. It was harmful to Haymon Lee's family to say that they had evidence of other suspects when it was really the same evidence that was adduced at the first trial. And it was harmful to Adnan Syed's family and to him because he was relying on these false representations by the Mosby administration.
Good evening, I'm Kai Jackson.
I'm Maxine Stryker. That decision from the city state's attorney's office comes just 14 hours before Syed is due to appear in court for a hearing to reduce his sentence to time served.
Fox 45's Jessica Babb joins us live with a closer look at the decision and what comes next for Syed. Jessica?
So this lengthy court filing lays out why Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates says the conviction should stand, essentially saying that the reasons given by Marilyn Mosby to vacate the conviction were both problematic and misleading. The high-profile case of Adnan Syed is taking a major turn.
Ivan Bates' decision really calls into question the integrity of the investigation that the Mosby administration conducted.
In 2000, Syed was convicted of killing his high school ex-girlfriend, Haymon Lee. Right there. After spending 2 decades in prison, he was released in 2022.
And again,
with Marilyn Mosby making the major decision to vacate his sentence, citing Brady violations and new information in the case.
We now know that the attempt to vacate his conviction was done only days before Marilyn Mosby herself was set to initially pick a jury in her federal case before it was inevitably postponed. So that action by her office has to be put in that historical perspective to truly understand what happens in the motion. The investigation by the Mosby administration, we now know, was flawed and rushed.
Now Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates announcing he's withdrawing the motion to vacate, meaning Syed's conviction will stand. Bates says after reviewing the case, he says the motion filed by Marilyn Mosby contains false and misleading statements that undermine the integrity of the judicial process, something he says he won't stand behind.
In the lengthy and well-reasoned motion put forward by the Office of the State's Attorney for Baltimore City, what became clear is that the Mosby administration, or what's being called the SRT, the Syed Review Team, really produced a narrative that was somewhat false and misleading as it pertained to what they called newly discovered evidence. But when you read this motion, what you discover is that the transcript from the trial where Adnan was found guilty by a jury, that most of the evidence that they're citing to the Mosby administration was already presented and was known by Syed's attorney.
Attorney Jeremy Eldridge, who isn't affiliated with this case, explains that some of the misleading evidence includes cell phone records, which experts during the trial didn't rely on, and DNA evidence.
They believe that simply because it didn't have a DNA, that somehow made him innocent in this case. That really is false logic.
Bates also says handwritten notes in the case don't point to other suspects and were likely disclosed to the defense before the trial.
So I think the public was really misled as far as what the newly discovered evidence was, and that's hurtful to all sides.
But this twist in the story comes as Syed is expected to be back in court Wednesday.
By reinstating the conviction, it simply means that the jury's verdict has been reimposed. But it doesn't mean that Adnan Syed cannot have his sentence modified.
As he and his attorneys are trying to get his sentence reduced through the Juvenile Restoration Act, which is a law that gives people who committed crimes as minors the chance to ask a judge to reduce their sentence after they've spent 20 years in prison.
There is a possibility that Adnan Syed remains free. There's also a possibility that his sentence is reimposed and he could return to jail. He, frankly, has a very marketable chance of not necessarily going back to jail, and that is the court's decision.
And that hearing will start at 9:30 tomorrow, and we'll let you know what happens. Live in Baltimore, Jessica Babb, Fox 45 News.
I'm Kai Jackson. Thank you for watching. Here's another video to watch. Also, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel.